Alright, what's going on everyone? Today I'm going to show you how to upgrade a Magic Arena starter deck that you get for free on Magic Arena. We'll be upgrading the deck in two stages. First I'll show you how to upgrade the deck with no rares, and then I'll show you some of the rares and mythics you can add if you already have them. I do caution you, however, to please spend your wild cards wisely. They're very hard to get, and I recommend spending them on cards that you think you're going to use in multiple decks. So today we are upgrading Izzet Spellpower, which is a blue-red spell deck. It has things like Spellgorger Weird, Spell Leader Wolverine, Experimental Overload, all of which get more powerful as we cast more spells. The Weird gets counters, the Wolverine gets double strike when we have lots of stuff in our graveyard, all that stuff. It also has spells, of course, things like Opt, Shock, Frost Breath. The idea being that we want to cast these early so our payoffs just get better and better as the game goes on. Cast a couple Ops, cast a Shock, get a few spells in the graveyard, suddenly Spell Eater Wolverine is attacking for 6. That's the general idea. Cast a bunch of cheap spells. We want cheap spells, and then, with those spells, have big creatures. Now, the problem with this deck is the same problem that basically all Izzet spell decks have, and that's consistency. This deck will lose to itself if you draw too many payoffs and not enough spells, or if you draw too many spells but you don't have any way to take advantage of them. This is a problem that a lot of Izzet spell decks have. You draw all of these and you're like, this is cool, but where are my spells? And then the next game you draw all of these and you're like, well, that's cool, but where's my Spellgorger? Where's my Wolverine, right? That's the problem with these spell-based decks, is you have like a 50-50 split between payoffs and enablers, and you just don't always get the right ratio. But we do have ways to fix this, especially in standard right now. So starting off with only commons and uncommons, we will take out 2 Vidalian Arcanists for 2 Sprite Dragons. These Arcanists are better suited for casting big spells, right? It's a ramp spell. It's a ramp creature, but we're not really ramping. We actually want to cast really small spells, and a bunch of them, and it's extra mana, but it's just not really what we want to do. So Sprite Dragon makes more sense. It's another payoff. It's going to get counters as we cast spells. Really good. Vidalian Arcanist, no, don't really like it, don't want it. Next we'll take out 2 Spellgorger Weirds for 2 more Sprite Dragons, and this is just because I think the dragons are better. They're just faster. Spellgorger Weird gets better as we cast more spells, but the fact that it doesn't come out until turn 3 means it's not even going to be good until like turn 4 or 5. Maybe turn 3 we play it, turn 4 we cast like 3 spells, but that means we didn't do anything the first 2 turns, and that means we're probably dead to like mono red aggro and green stompy. So Spellgorger Weird's fine, but it's so slow. So Sprite Dragon, just faster. Next we're going to take out Merfolk's Secret Keeper for Opt, because there's literally no reason to ever play the Secret Keeper in this deck, and why the flippin' heck did they put it in the first place? Out it goes, don't like it, completely pointless. Opt is better. For the same reason, we're taking out the other Secret Keeper for Crash Through. Crash Through literally is just 1 red mana, draw a card. That's it. 1 red mana, draw a card. It does give your creature trample, and sometimes that's relevant. We do build big creatures, but it's not really why we're playing this. We just want 1 red mana, draw a card, so we can churn through our deck and trigger all of our things. Which is why we're also taking out 2 Anticipates for 2 Crash Throughs. Without question, Anticipate is a superior draw spell. It's way better. 2 mana, you get to dig, you get to look through multiple cards, but the 2 mana is actually relevant because we want to be casting a bunch of spells once we have Sprite Dragon and stuff in play. So it doesn't seem like much, but I just want 1 mana, draw a card. Way more useful. Very important that, we can draw cards very cheaply. We're also going to take out an island for our 4th Crash Through. This deck has 25 lands at the start, and I think it's too many, especially with how many cards we're drawing. We're drawing so many cards that if we don't have lands, we'll draw into them just by drawing so many cards. So I think we can go down a land. 25 is too much for this deck. 24 is fine. Next, we're going to take out the Spell Eater Wolverines for Umara Mystics. This is just another payoff, but it doesn't rely on the graveyard, and I think that's important because there is so much graveyard hate in standard right now. We have Scavenging Oozes. We have the whatever this thing is. I forget the name of it, but it's on screen. There's just a lot of hate. To be fair, the Wolverine is way better against rogues. Like, if you get matched up against rogues, Wolverine is pretty insane. So in that matchup, it's a powerhouse. But in my experience, more often than not, it was just underwhelming. Like, I'd play 3 or 4 games and it just felt terrible. And then I'd get matched up against rogues and it felt insane. And it was like awesome. I was like, holy crap, the Wolverine's insane. And then like the next 3 or 4 games, I was like, well, I don't want the Wolverine now. So Umara Mystic is just always good. It's like good 99% of the time. So it's more consistently good. Wolverine is absolutely insane in one matchup and pretty mediocre in lots of other ones, whereas Mystic is just basically always good. Lastly, we're going to trade a mountain for a Spikefield Hazard. This could be played as a land, so we're not losing a land in our deck, but it's also a 1 mana spell to trigger our payoffs, so I like it better. It does come into play tapped, but I'm willing to play a tapped land that can double as a 1 mana spell to trigger all of our stuff. So that's the budget build. Moving on to rares and mythics. This is where we're really going to optimize this deck because we're playing adventure creatures. Now, the reason these are so good is they solve that consistency problem because they are both spells and they're threats, right? So if we get flooded on spells, normally like if you got flooded on these spells, it'd be like, well, I have spells, but I can't do anything. Now our spells double as 4 3s and 3 power flyers. So if we get our payoffs, right? If we get our Sprite Dragons, if we get our Umara Mystics, then that's great because that's what we're trying to do. But if we don't find those, we still have Brazen Borrower and Bone Crusher Giant to attack with. So this solves the Izzet spell slinging problem, which is, drawing too many spells or drawing too many creatures. Now that we have cards that are both spells and creatures, it makes a world of difference. So let's start by taking out Stolen by the Fae for Brazen Borrower. Stolen is too slow and too expensive. It's kind of cool, it's interesting, but just too expensive. It takes too long. It takes too long to do this. So I just rather have Brazen Borrower. We're also taking out 2 Frost Breaths for 2 more Brazen Borrowers. So Frost Breath is actually decent, but I think the biggest problem with it is the best time to cast this is on your opponent's turn during their first main phase, because then you tap the creatures for that combat phase and then they won't untap next turn, so you get 2 combat phases. But the problem is you want to cast stuff on your turn with this deck. I don't want to be casting stuff on my opponent's turn. So Brazen Borrower makes more sense. You can cast it on your turn. It still disrupts the opponent. It's also a threat, much more consistent. And for the same reason though, we're also taking out the Wavebreak Hippocamp for a Bone Crusher Giant. So this lets us draw cards for casting spells on our opponent's turn. But once again, we don't want to cast stuff on our opponent's turn. We want to cast stuff on our turn so we can attack with big creatures. So the Bone Crusher Giant just makes more sense. It's still 3 mana. You can cast it as a 3 mana 4/3, but it's also a spell, so it can trigger our stuff. And it's just better overall. It can kill something, so that's nice. Kill a small flyer if that's necessary. So makes more sense. We're also going to take out 1 Scorching Dragonfire for 1 Bone Crusher Giant. Again, this is just about consistency. The Scorching Dragonfire deals more damage, but it can only deal to creatures, whereas the Bone Crusher Giant can hit creatures and players, and also it doubles as a threat, so just much better. And then finally, I want to take out an Experimental Overload for 1 more Giant. I kind of like the Overload. Again, there's so much graveyard hate that I'm worried that this won't be great, but the reason I want to take 1 out is there's 3 in the deck, and I think 3 is too many. It's a 4 mana spell. We don't want to cast it until the late game, right? We really want to cast this on like turn 5, 6, 7 when we have at least 4 or 5 spells in the graveyard. So I think 3 is just too many. I think we're going to have too many of them. So going down 1 Experimental Overload is fine. We still have 2 in the deck, so we still have that spicy late game like blowout play, but I think Bone Crusher Giant's going to add just a little bit more consistency to the deck. Also just trims down the mana base, makes it a little bit more, leaner and faster, which I think is pretty important. Then we can fix the mana base. 3 cliffs go into 3 temples because scrying is generally more useful than gaining life. We can also replace 4 basic lands for the pathways, because why would you want to draw an island or a mountain when you can literally draw both, right? You can replace the last cliffs with a Fabled Passage, and then of course you can add 3 more Fabled Passages by replacing more basics. One more note though, there are still a few cards that I'm a little bit iffy on, like Shark Typhoon, Double Vision, Boon of the Wishgiver. These aren't bad cards. Shark Typhoon in particular is amazing. It's just that's a little clunky, right? Like, it's 6 mana, so we're not going to be getting to that very often with this deck. We're not a ramp deck, right? We're not in Sultai or Simic, so getting to this is hard. And then when we cycle it, I mean, cycling Shark Typhoon is great, but it doesn't trigger our stuff because we're not casting a spell. Double Vision also, like, it's really good. When we have it in play, it's amazing, but it's a 5 mana do nothing spell the turn we play it. So it's like, it's fine. You know, all of these cards are fine. Boon of the Wishgiver, by the way, doesn't trigger our payoffs when it's cycled, and it costs 6 mana to cast. So it's like, these are fine. I'm not taking them out because I think they're okay, but if you find them like kind of being suboptimal, if you want, you can replace them with more Stormwing Entities. Stormwing Entity is great. Riddleforms are pretty good. There's only one in the main deck. You could probably put a couple more of those. You could also replace crap. Why am I blanking on the card's name? This, you know, the one that puts the 2 tokens in play. You could swap these. You could replace this with Riddleform, and like, that's fine. I don't think it's 100% necessary, but like, you can. There's also Bone Crusher Giant. I only put 3 in. A 4th would be great. So like, if you find yourself and like not really liking Boon of the Wishgiver, replacing it with a 4th Bone Crusher Giant, fine. I don't think it's completely necessary, so I'm not going to count it, but these 3 cards are just like, they're good cards. They just don't always work as well as I would like in this specific deck. Like, you have a Shark Typhoon on your account now. You got one for free in this deck, and it's a good card. You can definitely build an entire deck around it. I've done that before, but in this specific deck, I feel like it's not as optimal as I would like. So all 3 of these can be replaced. Like, they're fine, but if you want to, you can replace these 3 cards with any of these, and it could be better. Anyway, those are our upgrades. You can check the description. I will post both versions of the deck. I'll post the budget version, I'll post the non-budget version. I will post them in the Magic Arena format, so all you have to do is highlight one, copy it, copy the text, go into your Magic Arena decks, and you can actually just import it straight into your account. It won't craft the cards automatically, so you don't have to worry about that. You can just open the deck, look it over. If you want to craft things, you can, but you know, maybe it's easier to look at it in your client as opposed to this deck list you're seeing right now. So if you want to check that out, feel free to import it. No big deal, up to you, but it's there if you want it. But yeah, hopefully that was helpful, guys. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.